Very good afternoon to everyone. So, I extend a warm welcome to all of you on the eighth day of this workshop organized by Amity Institute of English Studies and Research. I am Dr. Shweta Tiwari. The workshop is titled Learning to Write for Academic Success. In the last few days, you have been walked through multiple topics in which you were told about different elements of academic writing, and I'm sure it must have been very enriching for you in terms of both understanding and application. Today, we're going to look at something similar, which decides the quality of our writing. It influences the way our writing is received by the readers, and that is substitution, discourse markers, language, and style. So I'm going to begin now. I will share my screen. Please confirm once you can see it. Is it visible to everyone?
Yes, ma'am, it is. Please go ahead.
All right. So I request all of you to answer whenever I pose a question. Let the session be as interactive like all the other sessions that you have had so far. I've already told you that substitution, discourse markers, language, and style form the backbone of our writing. Why? We will find out. And without much ado, let us move on. Let us read this passage. And once I've finished reading, I want to know what is the fault that you find with this passage, if at all. The Simon family decided to go to the park. They carried tasty food to the park. It was bright and sunny in the park. The Simon family enjoyed in the park and came back. So raise your hand and let me ask each one of you individually. Yes, Shivani.
Ma'am, I found three things, ma'am. First one is obviously repetition, where to the park has been mentioned over and over again. Similarly, Simon family has also been mentioned. Third thing, I felt that the sentence structure is not in order. In the sense, many of these information could actually have been clubbed to shorter, longer sentences, but would have conveyed the meaning. For example, it was bright and sunny in the park, so they could have written the first line itself that the Simon family decided to go to the park because it was bright and sunny.
All right.
So
Okay.
it would have been more clear.
Definitely. So the observations are quite pertinent. Is there anyone who would like to add something to what Shivani just said? Raise your hand.
Hello, good afternoon, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, ma'am. As far as I can see, there is hardly any grammatical mistake in this paragraph. But what I can find is the word park. The word park, it has been added many a times, and I think this particular word could have been avoided for a better structure of this paragraph.
Right.
So we can see keep not only you have to take care of the grammar, but also you have to take care of the structure while writing any quality research paper. Thank you, ma'am.
Right. See, both of you are right. Grammatically talking, this passage is not incorrect. There is no grammatical fault in this passage. The tense, the placement of word is right. But still, this is a very distasteful passage because of the repetition of the phrase to the park over and over again. And Shivani rightly said that also the Simon family repeats itself 2 times in the passage. So what is actually happening? The observation is correct. The Simon family decided to go to the park. They carried tasty food to the park. It was bright and sunny in the park. The Simon family enjoyed in the park. So in the park, to the park, again and again, it somehow dilutes the effectiveness of the passage. So what could have been done to avoid this repetition?
Ma'am, I had one more observation. I don't know if it's valid, but the words like carried tasty food. So tasty, I feel, could have been replaced by delicious. And the last line, it is written that enjoyed in the park and came back. So it can be enjoyed and then returned home or something like that.
Yeah,
So
so
it would give more meaning, like a deeper form of understanding.
yeah, you're talking about substituting commonly used words with literally better synonyms. So let us not talk about that part because it will digress our discussion. All what I want to know right now is that instead of writing to the park again and again, what could have been done? Is there a way in which we can avoid this phrase?
Ma'am, it could have just been mentioned in the first line that Simon Pham decided to go to the park. I feel that sentence is the first. The first line is very apt, and it conveys all the meaning. And thereafter, to the park that need not be mentioned because
Yeah.
it's understood.
Right. So the Simon family decided to go to the park. They carry tasty food there. Instead of writing to the park again and again, you could have simply substituted the word with another word. Well, this is all what substitution is. Now, with this background, let us move on to the next slide and find out what actually substitutions are. All of you use substitutions on a day-to-day basis, but some of us might not be familiar that it is called a substitution, or you might not be conscious that you have made use of a substitute. Substitution. What is substitution? It refers to the replacement of a group of words or phrases with one word. Can somebody tell me the difference between a sentence and a phrase?
Ma'am, a sentence has a particular meaning even when it stand alone, but a phrase has no meaning if it stands alone. Though it has some particular meaning, but we cannot, we cannot judge the background of the meaning of that particular phrase.
Right. It does not provide as much information as a sentence. It is not long or complete like a sentence, but still it is able to deliver a meaning of its own. So substitution simply means when you replace a group of words or a phrase with one word. Just like to the park was replaced by the word there. So there will be regarded as a substitute for the phrase to the park. It can be done by using words like one, here, there, that, so, neither, few, etc. So all these words can be used as substitutes depending upon the situation. It is used to avoid repetition in a sentence. Well, this goes without saying. Why would we use a substitute? Because we don't want to repeat words, because we don't want our writing to appear redundant, because we don't want to cast an impression that we did not know a better word for this phrase or words that we've been using over and over again. We want to refine our writing. We want to make it appear polished. And hence, one of the most reliable strategies is to not repeat a lot of words. Sometimes when you write email and you reread them, you find that you have repeated one word quite a number of times. For example, kindly pay attention to the query that I have raised on so and so date. Kindly make sure that you reply by the end of the day. And then you realize that the word kindly, despite being a respectful word, starts looking very obsolete. And then you replace it by words like please or something like that. That is what substitution is. So far we know that substitution simply means replacement of a group of words or a phrase. It is done to enhance the quality of writing. It is done to avoid repetition. And the words that can be used as substitutions are one, here, there, that, so, neither, etc. I hope this is clear. And let us move forward. Let us look at some examples of substitution to have a better grasp on this. So the first sentence is, this is the biggest supermarket in the city. You can find everything in this supermarket. So you see the word supermarket again is replaced. I'm surprised nobody has asked me the question, aren't substitutes pronouns? Since you have not asked me that question, let me ask you. What do you feel? Are substitutes pronouns? What is a pronoun?
A word that can be used in the place of noun.
As simple as that. A word which is used in the place of noun is called as a pronoun. So do you think substitutes are pronouns? If yes, why? If no, why?
Ma'am, I would say it's not necessary all the time. Like in this first sentence, it is mentioned that in the supermarket. So over there, you can actually use here. But sometimes we notice that the pronouns are the ones that are being repetitively used. So sometimes you might have to replace the pronoun itself.
Yes.
So during that time, you might have to use a noun.
right? May or may not be. So this is the biggest supermarket in the city. You can find everything in this supermarket. Again, supermarket is being repeated. So in place of in this supermarket, we can simply write here. This is the biggest supermarket in the city. You can find everything here. Let's look at the second example. All the cakes look delicious, but I want the cake with sugar icing. Similarly, all the cakes look delicious, but I want the one with sugar icing. There are some more examples. He wanted to go back at 5 p.m., but I did not want to go back at 5 p.m. So this can be substituted with the word then. He wanted to go back at 5 p.m., but I did not want to go back then. Another example, Rick has purchased a new car. He doesn't let anyone drive his new car. So new car can be replaced with the word it. Rick has purchased a new car. He doesn't let anyone drive it. Is this clear to everyone?
Ma'am, I have a query. In
Yes.
the second part, he wanted to go back at 5 p.m., but I did not want to go back. Can we just avoid writing then here?
That's a very good question because it brings me to the next point that I would discuss. Those words are called as ellipses. When you omit something which you feel is not needed. So here, because we are discussing only substitutes, let us stick to that. I'm going to clear your doubt after we finish with the discussion of substitutes. Those words are known as ellipses. When we avoid repeating on purpose, when we omit something, when we delete something because we feel it is not needed. So before moving on, I just want a confirmation from all of you. I hope I'm making sense.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Let us look at the types of substitution because not every sentence is the same. Therefore, the kind of substitute we will use can also not be the same. There are three types of substitution. The first is nominal. What is nominal substitute? Nominal substitutes include words like one, once, the same, the sort, the kind. And it can also be indefinite pronouns like some, enough, a little, little, a few, few, either or neither. So these are called as nominal substitutes. Look at the example, you will understand it immediately. If you want a bag, they will provide you with a bag. So the word a bag can be replaced with one. If you want a bag, they will provide you with one. This is an example of nominal substitution. Moving on, the second is verbal substitution. Now, how is a verbal substitution different from a nominal substitution? Verbal substitutes are the words that replace a verb element. Naturally, it mainly uses words like do, does, doesn't. Let us look at an example. So person A says, I don't like dishonest people. Person B says, yes, nobody does. So does here is equal to liking dishonest people. If I say that I don't like stale food, you can simply say nobody does. And the meaning is inherent in itself that nobody likes stale food. And the third category is clausal. Okay, I want somebody to just repeat what are substitutes. For the ones who've just joined, I can see a few students have just joined. Can somebody quickly tell us what are substitutes?
Substitutes are just the words or phrases that are replaced just to enhance the quality of the sentence or the quality of the paragraph.
Right. So a word which is used as a replacement of a group of words or phrases. This is done to avoid repetition, to enhance the quality of your writing, to make your writing more appealing, and to get away with all the obsolete information which is not required. The last category is clausal. What is that? Clausal substitute replace a clause with words like so or not. They are used to express a belief, faith, emotion, or assumption. Like person A says, will he join the meeting on time? Person B says, I think so. So what is happening here? The answer is written in a short form. Just the word so is used instead of saying, I think he will join the meeting on time. So this entire phrase is substituted with the word so. And the more important thing you have to keep in mind in case of clausal substitute is that there is always an expression of belief or faith or subjectivity or emotion in these kind of substitute. So will he join the meeting on time? I may not be sure, but I will say, I think so. Then is Hector going with you? Possibly not or surely not. So these are the different types of substitute. If this is clear, we will move on to the next category, which is ellipsis. Though this was not a part of the today's topic, but I thought it was important because most students confuse themselves between substitutes and ellipses. And the point was also raised by one of the students here. So it's better that we talk about it briefly. If this is clear, we will move on to the next slide. Shall we?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Ellipses. So I've written this. Don't get confused between substitute and ellipses. Before I start, can anyone throw some light on ellipses? What are ellipses? Can you just highlight by giving an example?
Ellipsis is an word, it's completion or omission of replacement of word. It's known as ellipsion.
All right. An example? Anyone? We use ellipses a lot, but as I told you that you might not be conscious that you've made use of an ellipsis. Can anyone think of an example?
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Speak up, Karan.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, actually, I'm joining in the meeting.
Okay, that is fine. I thought you had an example. Never mind. So let us see what ellipses are. Ellipses mean complete omission or replacement of a word. So in the previous slide, a person raised a question that why can't we just say that I didn't want to go back? Why do we have to use a substitute? Well, very right. We can completely omit that part. If we feel that information is not needed, it is redundant, we can not use it. Or if we feel that from a big chunk, whatever we need is only 4 lines long. So for example, I'm writing a research paper on Indian English drama, and there is a research paper which I find which has got 2 paragraphs about Indian English drama, and the rest is about Indian English writing in general. So I'm not going to use the entire passage. I'm just going to use those lines that I need. And for that, I will have to use ellipses. This is done to reduce length of a sentence and achieve textual coherence. What is meant by textual coherence? You have had a full session on coherence. Can somebody tell me what is meant by textual coherence?
Ma'am, textual coherence simply means the the expression of ideas, that is connecting one sentence to the another. Like you should not like your ideas should not be vague, like it, so that we cannot identify the relation between 2 consecutive sentences.
Right. Okay. So textual coherence in a way means logical transition of thoughts. Can somebody add a line or two to what Nihal just said? What is textual coherence?
Ma'am, can we just say that the flow of ideas should be connected from one sentence to another?
Yes, that is what textual coherence
There should not
is.
be any obstacle.
Yes.
Ma'am?
Yes.
Can I say something?
Yes,
Ma'am, it is the most popular and convenient way for daily fix of the news.
Karan, would you like to repeat yourself?
Ma'am, I said that it is the most popular and convenient way.
For?
Ma'am, for reading.
For reading. Okay, yes, see, it can definitely be used for reading and writing alike, but textual coherence, let me now just put it straight, means that there should be some logic in the transition of your thoughts. So if in the first line you're talking about the pandemic, in the second line you suddenly start talking about kitchen gardening. So that will not make any sense because there is no coherence between what you said in the first line versus what you said in the second. The transition of thought will not have any logic. So the paragraph that you will write will appear incoherent. So ellipses are used for the sake of achieving textual coherence. In other words, it implies leaving some parts. Now here are some example of
Ma'am, so it is basically like getting to the point.
Okay, I would want to know who's asking this question.
Ma'am, Harmeet.
Yes, Harmeet. Getting to the point as in?
Ma'am, leaving the rest of the unnecessary part and talking to basically up to the point.
Absolutely. Talking just what is needed. And as you rightly said, leaving the unnecessary part. I will give you some examples and you will understand it immediately. So here it is. The first person says, can you come to meet me for some time? There are two ways in which I can answer this question. Yes, I can come to meet you for some time, or maybe I can come to meet and see you for some time. So here, what you can do is you can just skip the second part. Meet me for some time or meet you for some time. You can simply say maybe. Instead of saying, maybe I can come to meet you for some time, you can simply say maybe. So that in a way is going to convey your message to the person you're talking to. Second example, do you want to stay indoors or do you want to go out for a walk? The answer can be, another way of writing it using ellipsis can be, do you want to stay indoors or go out for a walk? So you don't have to repeat, do you want to again, because it's redundant. It's simply repetition. It's adding volume, which is unnecessary to the sentence. So you can simply say, do you want to stay indoors or go out for a walk? The meaning is not distorted at all. You have omitted, you have deleted whatever is not required. He asked if it was possible for me to drop his son to school and pick him from school. So he asked if it was possible for me to drop his son to school and pick him. That's all. You don't have to say from school. There should have been a to here. Yes, please.
Ma'am, how maybe explain the person A sentence?
Once again, please repeat your question.
I mean, person B, we only write maybe and we replace the sentence. I can come to meet and see you for some time.
Yeah. So what is the question?
The question is, can you come to meet me for the some time? So ma'am, we use only maybe.
Yeah, we can only use maybe. See, if I say, maybe I can come to meet you for some time, of course, the other person will understand. But if I just say maybe, is it going to disturb the meaning in any way?
Ma'am, it's just going to shorten the answer.
Yeah, it's going to shorten and it's going to increase the quality of the conversation. Imagine if all of us repeated a lot of things, if the whole sentence was repeated again every single time. Imagine how heavy the text would have been and how redundant it would have sounded. There would have been no joy in reading, to read the same sentences, the same phrases over and over again. And that is why when you're prepared for group discussions and presentation, there's a point which is made that don't repeat. Repetition casts a very poor impression of you as a speaker and as a writer. So you can use omission or ellipsis for this.
Ma'am, I have also an opinion.
Yes.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay.
I want to know that in last sentence, why aren't we using from in last sentence? He asked if possible for me to drop his son to school, pick him up. So why are you not using from? Why from is not used here in this sentence?
No, what is the question? That why aren't we using from school?
Why from is not used here? It means from is not there. Why
In the second sentence?
he asked if possible, last sentence, last.
Yes, yes. Tell me, what is the question?
Why, ma'am, the question is he asked if possible for me to drop his son to school and pick him up. Why from is not used here? From school.
I think I'm not able to understand your question.
Ma'am, this one sentence, last one.
Yes. So the first sentence is, let me read it out and then you tell me what is your doubt. He asked if it is possible for me to drop his son to school and pick him up from school. This is the first sentence.
Yes,
You
sure.
can, yeah.
Yes. So in second sentence, why from is cut means in
Because
second
we are
sentence.
making use of ellipses.
Okay.
Because we are trying to refine our writing skills. Because if we say, he asked if it was possible for me to drop his son to school and pick him up, that is going to deliver complete meaning. So naturally, if the son will be dropped at school, he will be picked from school. That's understood. It's inherent. Right? Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Ma'am, please stop. I have also an opinion.
Yes.
Particularly on the second sentence. Like if you are saying, can you come to meet me for some time? And then person B says maybe. Like if we just if you just look closely to the word maybe, I think we can simply we can simply we can simply imagine that there is hardly any chance that he will come to meet him. He will come to meet him sometime. There is hardly any chance. But if we add maybe comma I can, don't you think that's the confirmation thing is, then don't you think the level of confirmation or we can say the percentage of confirmation is a bit more if we add maybe I can as compared to
No,
just maybe? What
that
do you
is
think?
not going to make any difference. I will tell you why. Because the word maybe is used when you aren't sure. It doesn't matter if you say maybe I can, because the situation still remains the same. The status is still unclear. It's still unsure because you've made use of the word maybe. So if I say maybe, it means I'm not sure. If I say maybe I can, it still means that I'm unsure.
In
Ma'am,
fact,
I just
Shweta,
wanted to ask, don't you think?
Yes, ma'am.
if I may just ask, that's a very good point you made about maybe not really saying you, because maybe still leaves it.
1 second, ma'am. Yes, please, ma'am.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Am I audible, Shweta?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, you're audible.
Shweta, am I audible
Yes,
or no?
yes, yes, ma'am. You're audible.
What I was saying, in that case, perhaps it would become maybe I could, to make it a little more of a probability than, maybe
But
perhaps.
I think in this case, we can give the person a benefit of doubt. Maybe he wasn't sure. So it depends on the context, I think.
Okay, on the specific question, can you
Yes.
come to meet me for some time?
Yes. I think it will depend on the context. If we are reading the same sentence in a story, so it will depend on what has transpired before this conversation.
That you're right. Okay, very interesting discussion.
So shall we move forward?
Yes, ma'am.
Everyone? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So here are
Yes, ma'am.
3 questions, and it's an exercise. Let's see what we have learned so far. So there are 3 options to every question. Let us see what is the right answer for each. Is she coming with us? I dash as no one likes her. Hope doesn't, hope not, hope no.
I hope not.
Ma'am, I hope no.
I hope not. I hope not as no one likes her. So I hope doesn't is wrong. I hope no as no one likes her is wrong. Second is, are you planning to buy a car? We dash, but not anymore. We are, we were, we do.
We were.
We were.
We were.
We were. And
We
why
were.
not?
It's
Why
talking
not?
about past tense.
Yes. Why not we do?
Because I think according to this question, I think he has already made a decision.
Yeah.
So
He has
do is
already
generally
made
used for
the Yeah, because
do
when
is
you
the
say,
first form of the verb.
yeah, but because when you say not anymore, So that means the decision has already been taken. You're clear in your mind. We were, but not anymore. He doesn't prefer Mexican food, but he did not dash. Say so, tell so, tell.
Say so.
Say so.
Say so.
Are you sure?
Yes.
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 Now you're making confused.
Yes, say so is the right answer. So don't get confused. If you're sure, then speak it up confidently. Say so. He doesn't prefer Mexican food, but he did not say so. All right. Now, with this, we come to the end of substitutes. Let us move to another interesting category, which is discourse markers. And I can bet that all of you use discourse markers, but probably you're not aware that they are called as discourse markers. So let us see what they are. I hope my screen is visible to everyone.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So discourse markers, first of all, tell me, do you have any level of familiarity with this word, discourse marker? Do you know what they are?
No, ma'am.
Anyone?
No, ma'am.
All right. So discourse markers are commonly called as linking words or sentence connectors. These are used to bind and organize a group of sentences or paragraphs. I will give you an example and it will become clear. So remember, linking words are discourse markers. They're also called as sentence connectors. Can you make some sense of it now? Linking words, connecting sentences, they're not conjunctions. They're not conjunctions. So if I say I brought pen and pencil to school, the word and here joins pen and pencil. That's not what I'm talking about. Have you found yourself using words like well, anyway?
Similarly can be
Louder, please.
Ma'am.
ma'am, similarly can come under discourse markers.
Similarly, can you give me an example?
Like if
Okay, let me explain it first and then you decide. So back to the question. Do you think you make use of words like well, anyway, to start with, to top it, when you talk to each other? Speak up.
yes, ma'am.
We do. That's all what discourse markers are. So they link words. They are also called as sentence connectors because they connect two or more sentences. Words like nevertheless, however, anyway, so, to begin with, although, etc. can be called as discourse markers.
Ma'am.
And yes?
Ma'am, can I use maybe with, as a discourse marker?
It depends. It depends. I have got a few examples here. Let me walk you through those examples first, and then maybe you can give me an example and we will decide. So these are
Yes,
the
ma'am.
words that are used to avoid abrupt and unconnected sentences. For example, you are feeling bad because of something which has been said to you by another person, right? And you are in mid of a meeting. So you start talking about how terrible he has made you feel and how rude he was in whatever you said. And then you say, anyway, let's get back to the meeting. So imagine how abrupt it would have seemed had you just been ranting about how terrible you are feeling, and then you would have simply started talking about the facts and numbers of the meeting. You need a word to, have this transition of thought, to move from one thought to the other without it looking abrupt or disconnected. Those words are discourse markers. As some example here, well, I've decided to go to, I have decided to invest in stock market or stock exchange. So this is an example of discourse marker. Of course, I've underlined, so there's no point in asking which word is a discourse marker. Well,
Yes,
I have
ma'am.
decided to invest in stock exchange. Some more examples. I can't enter the full screen mode. Can somebody from IT help me? It was happening a while ago. Can somebody from IT please help me? I have to enter the full screen mode.
It is not in full screen now.
Can everyone see it in the full screen mode?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. So another example can be, anyway, let's come back to the point. Then you can probably add a shade of green in the painting. Ron will obviously have to pay for the damage. You see, it was my sister's wedding, so I had to take a leave. These are the words that are, in a way, they're also called as fillers, by the way. Fillers, sentence connectors, or fillers, or linking words. These are all synonyms for discourse markers. To throw some more light on this, let us have a look at the role and use of discourse markers. So, for example, the word anyway, can you tell me why do we use anyway? Apart from the example that I've written here, can you give me any other example using the word anyway?
Can I?
Yes, first let us see why it is used. Marks a departure from the topic. So, for example, you're speaking something in a flow and then you digress. So, to come back, you will use the word anyway. To mark a departure from whatever you've been saying, to ask the others to focus on what you will be saying from that point onwards, then we use anyway. So the example that I have written here is, I'm not happy with what he said. Anyway, let's talk about something else. So again, the thought is that the person has made me feel bad, but anyway, let's forget it and talk about something else. Yes, any example from your side using the word anyway?
Anyway, anyway, we continue the work.
Anyway, we continue the work. So where is the departure? It seems that the first part of the sentence is missing. Try.
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, I can give you. Okay.
Yes, please.
We are getting late for the work, so anyway, we can continue our work.
We are getting late for our work, so anyway, we can continue our work. So the thoughts are the same in both the first and the second part. We are getting late for our work, so we should continue our work. So as I said, anyway is used to mark a departure from the topic. When you have to say something different from what you were saying, then you use anyway. Quickly give me an example.
Ma'am, another example would be, though I am not interested in attending his wedding, but anyway, let's go.
But anyway, let's go. Okay. Now, though and but. Yeah, again, what do we use with although, yet, or but? So this is a major confusion that happens. What is used
But
with
ma'am, we often use but I don't think it's incorrect or correct. You can further clarify.
Okay, I want the others to respond to. Shivani. This is a very simple question.
May I try?
Yes, okay, Parth.
Oh, ma'am, I am not interested to do the work. Anyway, I have to do this work.
Yeah, so that is right, but I was talking about something else. With which word do we use yet? With though or although?
Although.
Are you sure?
I'm not sure, but
You use yet with although. So coming back to anyway, it marks a departure from the topic. So just like you said that I'm not interested in doing this work anyway, let me finish it. Next is well, used to indicate several emotions like annoyance, surprise, anger. So, well, I did not expect that kind of response from you. So this clearly shows that the person who is speaking the sentence is disappointed in the other person. Well, I did not expect that kind of response. Well, you need to be more careful with your choices in future. Well, this is such a wonderful surprise. I wasn't expecting it. Something like that. So different shades of emotions like surprise, anger, and you can say annoyance or things like that can be can be used in those cases. For a start, introduces the first item or the most important point in an argument. The exam was difficult. For a start, many questions were out of syllabus. So if I look for a Hindi equivalent to clarify it, most of you will be able to understand. So whenever we're discussing and we say that this wasn't good, so we can say that chalo shuruaat isi se karte hain, to start with, or for a start. So the Hindi equivalent is something like that. Can you give me an example? The exam was difficult. For a start, many questions were out of syllabus. Anyone?
May I?
Yes, please.
The XYZ shopping site was very bad. For a start, it was crashing again and again.
You'll have to repeat yourself. I couldn't hear it.
The XYZ shopping site was very bad. For start,
I'm afraid I will not be able to comment because I couldn't hear you. Anyone else?
We don't know how to protect from COVID. For a start, let's follow the rules and regulations of lockdown.
This sentence is slightly incorrect because that is not where you use for a start. Let me just rephrase the sentence. So the pandemic has been rearing its ugly head. For a start, many people have lost their jobs. So it means that the pandemic has been very difficult for people. For a start, many people have lost their jobs. Some people have lost their lives, so on and so forth. Okay. I mean, used to justify or add value to what you have said. Now, most of us have a habit of using I mean, like a number of times while we're talking. So Rosie should not have spoken rudely to us. I mean, it was quite inappropriate. So this is done to assert what you have said in order to add value, in order to directly or indirectly justify whatever you are saying. So I mean this. So for example, that you should be more careful while talking to your seniors. I mean, the repercussions are huge, right? So can somebody give me an example? I mean,
excuse me, ma'am.
yes.
Ma'am, Bhavna have written something in chat box.
Let me just see. Can you just read it out to me?
Yes, ma'am. The website was very bad. For a start, it was crashing again and again.
Yes, yes, this can work. So again, I mean, quickly give me an example. This should be easy. Maybe because I'm making you too conscious, you're not able to think of an example. Otherwise, this is something we use on a daily basis. I mean, hurry up. Nobody?
Oh, ma'am,
The food was not up to the mark. I mean, it was awful.
The food was not up to the mark. I mean, the taste was very bland. Okay. Yes, I think somebody
Is it
else.
necessary to add test word to it?
See, when you say the food was not good, I mean, it was awful. So the purpose is defeated because when you say it was very bad, it in itself means it was awful. Why it was awful is what you're supposed to say after I mean. So the food was very bad. I mean, it was stale. The food was very bad. I mean, it was tasteless. Something like that.
Ma'am, may I try?
Yes, please.
My guitar teacher was not didn't taught me perfectly. I mean, he didn't explain the things clearly.
Okay, so you said guitar teacher?
Yeah, ma'am.
Okay, so my guitar teacher did not teach me properly. I mean, nothing was explained properly. Fine. Moving on. Mind you, used to highlight something in order to warn or avoid confusion. So usually the word mind you is used for warning, but sometimes it can also be used to avoid any sort of confusion, to bring your attention to a point once again so that there is no confusion later on. For example, every candidate is going to get only one chance. Mind you, no retest will be conducted. So mind you can be used in this sense. Moving on, to be honest explains that your information is reliable and you're being truthful. To be honest, he was always reckless with money. So when you speak something and you know that you are giving the right information, you're being truthful, still you want to add some value to that, then you can use to be honest. It's just done to accentuate the information, the honesty in the information. That's all. To be honest, I'm never going to come back to this place. To be honest, he was never too judgmental about his choices or something. Right? Shall we move on?
Ma'am, some common words like without further ado, or the another word that we often use like with due respect. Can this word come under the under the
Discourse
category
markers.
of discourse
Yes,
markers?
yes. Without much ado can.
Like for your information, or
No,
like
not for your information.
with
Is
due
not
respect.
for your information is not a discourse marker. This is a formal usage. For your information. So you don't say that for your information, I'm telling you this. This is, see, try to keep in mind the definition that I gave you in the beginning. These are joiners of words. These are fillers. For your information will form a part of the concrete information. Let us look at some more examples. Obviously indicates assertion or assurance. You have to work hard for success. It will obviously take time, but you will see the result. Can somebody give me another example to highlight this point? Obviously is a very common word. Yes.
Can I give example for
Yes.
obviously?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Pandemic is going on. Obviously, uh, uh, we have to don't go to anywhere from our house.
Okay. So let me just refine what you said, Karan. There's a pandemic, and obviously it is advisable that everybody stays indoors. So
Yes,
it
ma'am.
is done to indicate assertion. It is done to stress something which is known to everyone and for the sake of assurance.
Yes, ma'am.
Sort of or kind of. So these words are similar, and the usage is also very similar. Used to estimate or explain something that is partly true. So when you're not too sure about an information, you use the word sort of or kind of. In some cases, when you're not able to find the exact word or term for something, even then we use that sort of or kind of. For example, if I'm trying to explain you the taste of a particular dish, so and I'm not able to tell it to you exactly, so how will I substitute that feeling? I will say, so it was not bitter, it was sort of pungent. So I'm not able to find the right word for that taste, but I'm trying my level best to explain it to you. So it was not sweet, but sort of on the sweeter side. So it is done to estimate, to approximate. Your opinion about America's economy seems to be sort of influenced by your long stay there. And your opinion about America's economy seems to be kind of influenced by your long stay there. Both words can work, right? Nonetheless, crossing barriers or working despite problems. I wasn't feeling well, but I made the project nonetheless. I want one of you to give me an example for this word, nonetheless.
I did not perform well in the interview. Nonetheless, I got the job.
I got the job nonetheless. Okay. All right. Anyone else? Any other example? Sangeeta, would you like to answer?
Ma'am, for example,
Yes.
I was not able to complete the project, but I
Scored well
nonetheless.
nonetheless. Okay, so I wasn't able to complete the project, but I scored well nonetheless. All right. To top it, used to indicate something undesirable in addition to what you've just said. He's a liar, and to top it, he never accepts his mistake. So when you are telling something which is already undesirable or unacceptable, and then you use this word to top it, that there is a fault already, and to top it all, this is also part of the problem. So he's a liar, and to top it, he never accepts his mistakes, right? Actually, to lay stress or to just add emphasis or focus on something, I bumped into the lady. Actually, I did not see her coming. So you are trying to tell the other person that what led to that accident. Actually, I did not see her coming. Now, actually is a simple word again. Can somebody make a sentence? Actually. And kindly just don't make a sentence. Keep the background in mind. We're talking about discourse markers.
Ma'am, may I?
Yes, please.
Actually, I didn't do my work, so actually I didn't do my project complete. I didn't completed my project as I didn't get any notification about it.
Where is the word actually used?
Actually, I didn't get notification about it.
So what you
Can
said
I
is,
add something?
yeah.
I was not able.
Speak up.
Yes, ma'am. I can't join the meeting. Actually, I facing the network issue.
I am facing.
I
Okay.
am.
Yeah. So I did not join the meeting. Actually, I was facing network issues. Okay. So this shows that it is not really your fault. Because of a technical glitch, you could not be the part of the meeting. Okay. So let us move on to the next slide. Is this much clear to everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Because from here on, we're going to talk about language and style, which is going to be slightly different from the discussion we have had so far. So this is going to be more theoretical in nature and not as objective as the discussion we have had till now. So with that, let us go on to the next slide. Language and style.
Ma'am, can we use nonetheless in the middle of the sentence?
Give me an example.
Like the example that I gave, I did not perform well in the interview. Nonetheless, I got the job.
I got the job. Yes, yes. So it is preferred at the end, but it is not wrong. Okay, so I want all of you to be more responsive from here on, because this portion is theoretical. Language and style. So before I start talking to you about what is language, here are two pictures. Can you tell me a little bit about the first picture? What do you see here? If I ask you to describe this picture, how would you do it?
Now it's a picture of a sun and a sea.
Sun and sea. Okay. Anybody who can speak a couple of lines about it in one go? Samya, would you like to try?
Excuse me, ma'am, may I?
Yes.
We can see a sunset near the coastal lines. The sky seems orange due to the hue, and the sea is calm.
Okay, and the sea is calm. Perfect. Anyone else? just as much as Riddhi spoke. I don't want a very detailed or elaborate description of the picture, just a line or two. Even if one student responds.
This is probably showing nature at its best form, because here we are getting the view of sunset, and due to the calmness of sea, there is like to a distance it seems like they both are meeting. There is some meeting point, and this is truly signifying that no matter what happens, there we should always have a calmness, and the calmness of sea is signifying it, and also the setting of sun is signifying that no, doesn't matter if we face any difficulties, but there's always a new beginning.
Yeah, there's always hope. There will be another day. All right. So we have seen two different interpretations of the same picture. Riddhi talked about the orange hue and the coastal line, the calmness of water. On the other hand, Nihal attached it to symbolic meaning, that the calmness of the sea might be deceptive, but whatever challenges are thrown at you, the setting sun symbolizes that there will be a new day. All right. Let us look at the second picture. Can you interpret this picture? What is happening here?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, please. Yes.
Ma'am, basically this picture showing the different sources of communications.
Okay. Different sources of communication. Fine. Anyone else? Just speak a line or two about this picture also.
Ma'am, this is probably showing how much we are trapped in materialistic things. And in fact, if you look closely to the picture, it seems like all four persons are there are two couples, and if you look closely, it seems that both the couples are fighting with each other. There is hardly a communication.
All right. So again, you have added a symbolic dimension to the picture. So of course, Karan, you're right that people are preoccupied with materialistic things, because you can see that 1, 2, 3, ABC, then there are notebook and something which appears like a coin to me, so on and so forth. And also you can see that real communication is not taking place, because from the body language of at least the first couple, we can see that they are kind of, discourse marker, arguing with each other, and the second couple seems in state of confusion. All right. So please excuse me if I have made you think too deeply about this picture. The intention was not to make you read between the lines. On the contrary, it was something much simpler. I just wanted to know, what is the tool that you have used to express all this? How were you able to tell me what you're feeling about these pictures?
And by the visuals of the pictures.
Visuals is fine. You have seen the visual, you interpreted the visual, you processed the information in your mind, you had an opinion about the picture, and you wanted to convey. What after that? What happened after that?
Ma'am, through language.
You use language to convey this to me. How did you communicate? What was the tool? What was the source that you used to convey what you were feeling about these pictures? You used language, right? Keeping that in mind, can you define language for me?
Ma'am, language is a source for communication.
Language is a source for communicating your ideas, your thoughts. That's right. And what is communication, by the way? Is there any difference between language and communication, or can they be used as a synonym for each other?
Communication means interacting within us, and language is a source of communication.
Okay, that's really well put. So communication is simply the process of exchange of ideas, thoughts, opinion, message from one person to the other. But the source which is used, I'm talking about verbal communication. So the source which is used to convey this information, opinion, or message is language. Is there one language in the world?
No, ma'am.
No, there are multiple languages, many languages. And has language got a cultural baggage too? Do you think
Yes, ma'am.
language is just alphabets put together? Or do you think there is a cultural baggage that language has?
Cultural baggage.
Cultural baggage. So one word is not going to suffice. I want you to tell me a little more about it.
Ma'am, for example, in Japanese language, people can make their words with the help of trees and mountains, like katakana and kanji. So there is also a cultural background in language.
Okay.
They make their words with the help of nature.
They make their words with the help of nature. Okay. And this question, especially for literature students, there is a particular poetry form which is inspired by the same feeling. What is that called?
Regional literature.
No, it's called haiku. Haiku. Anyway, so coming back to the question, we have established a difference between language and communication. Now, let us also try to find out the cultural baggage of language. Every language has got a certain culture to it. So language simply doesn't mean that we are conveying our ideas and that's about it. I must have given example to some of the students here. Let me just repeat it to the ones who are not familiar. For example, in Hindi, we have a word called juthan. I'm sure all of you are familiar with this word, juthan, right? Can you tell me the English equivalent of juthan? If I say बचपन में उसे सिर्फ जूठन ही दिया जाता था, इसीलिए उसके अंदर क्रांति की भावना जागी. I want you to give me an English equivalent for the word juthan.
Leftover food.
Now tell me.
It might be embrace.
Sorry?
Juthan could also be a technical term would be embrace.
Okay, see, leftover.
May I?
Yes, please.
Ma'am, juthan means the food that cannot be served.
Okay, that is right. A food which
can
cannot
use
be
abundant.
served. Please repeat.
Can use abundant.
Abundant? No, juthan is not abundant. So somebody said leftover food, which I think is quite near to what can be the English equivalent for the word juthan. But tell me, is leftover food, unused food, discarded food convey the same amount of cultural subordination that a few people have to go through in the society because they are made to eat juthan? When I say उसे बचपन से जूठन दिया जाता था जिसकी वजह से उसके अंदर क्रांति की भावना जागी, does it speak anything to you about the kind of feeling that person must have had?
The person would be rebellious.
The person would become rebellious because talking in the Indian context, juthan is the food which is not regarded fit for consumption of the family members. So whatever is left is either given to the house helps or it is given to the pet animals because it is not regarded fit for consumption. And if I talk about the experiences of Dalit members in the society, then you know that juthan is a word which has a lot of trauma and pain associated to it. The member of the high caste society always discarded, their clothes and food, and they gave it to people of the lower caste of the society. And hence that became a part of their living. So think of it. You cannot find an appropriate equivalent for the word juthan along with the cultural baggage it has in any other language. Similarly, if I ask you to give me an English equivalent for the word karvat, can you tell me if I say sari raat karvat badalte nikal gayi? What kind of a frame of mind does it suggest? Sari raat karvat badalte nikal jana?
Sleepless nights.
Sleepless nights. And definitely if you're having a sleepless night, either you are anxious or you are under some sort of mental pressure. That is why you're not able to sleep properly. Sari raat karvat badalte nikal gayi. Now, if I ask you for an English equivalent, you will say changing sides. But again, changing side is just an approximation for that meaning. That is the magic of language. That is what I mean when I say every language has got a cultural baggage. Language is definitely a mode of communication, but is that all what language is? No. Is this much clear to everyone? Then we will move forward.
Yes, ma'am.
Anything that you want to ask or you want me to readdress so far? Okay.
Ma'am, actually in literature, Om Prakash Balmiki ji has written a very good work by the title Juthan.
Juthan,
You could
right,
have
right.
mentioned it. Yeah, you could have mentioned it because I think it's one of the best works written on Dalit literature. And I think every literature students must, must read at least once.
Yeah, but the audience here comprise mixed batches. So not everyone is from literature, but the case in point is right. And the example of Dalits was just given in order to highlight the point. We're not talking about Dalit literature here. So I was just talking how it is difficult to find equivalents of every word in another language. So the whole idea was to make all of you understand that every language has got a cultural baggage. So definitely every language is different. The intricacies of every language is different. The nuances, the shades are different. Naturally, the style will also be different. But there are still some common meeting points, and that is what we're going to discuss here. Okay, let us look at language in detail now. So we've already established that language is a tool for communication. The simplest definition and the easiest understanding of language is the tool, the weapon, the aid that we use to communicate our ideas to the other person is language. So language may be defined as the primary tool for verbal communication. Can anyone tell me why have I written verbal here? Why have I not written communication? Okay, the answer is very simple.
Ma'am, can I?
Yes.
Ma'am, because ma'am, language is connected with verbal communication. It is
And
directly
what?
connected.
Yes, and what is the other kind of communication apart from verbal?
Ma'am, non-verbal
Non-verbal communication, absolutely. So we don't use any sort of language in non-verbal communication. That is why I wrote only verbal communication. Can somebody tell me in which category are you going to situate writing? Is it verbal or non-verbal?
Ma'am, non-verbal.
Is there anyone here who feels it is verbal communication?
Ma'am, writing also comes under verbal communication. Non-verbal communication includes signs, symbols, gestures, hand movements, etc.
Yeah, that is right. See, writing will be classified under verbal communication because at the end of the day, you're making use of language, even if it is in the written form. Non-verbal communication is strictly the communication in which you make use of gestures, body language, eye movement, so on and so forth. So coming back, language may be defined as a primary tool for verbal communication. Language is used to convey a message, opinion, idea, or emotion. So I hope all of you will now not get confused between communication and language. They're two different things. And language is determined by three main aspects. What are they? Communicative, structural, and interactional. Let us look at them in detail now. Communicative, it suggests that language is mainly a mode of expression. Now, it depends on how you're using language. What is the meaning of language for you? So for a person who is not familiar with the different nuances of language, for him or her, language would be nothing but simply a mode of expression. Just because a person is feeling thirsty, he would say that I want a glass of water. So the communication has been done, language has been used, but the purpose of this use is nothing more than simply function. So because the person is feeling hungry, he wants some food. Because he is feeling thirsty, he wants a glass of water. So this is called as communicative aspect of language, in which you focus only and only on expressing what you're feeling. There is no added value to this conversation. There is no hidden message. There is no reading between the line, simply the communication of ideas. The second is structural aspect. Can anyone tell me what is structural aspect? If you want, you can read it from here. It implies that different elements in a language are interlinked to produce the complete meaning. Can somebody break this down?
Structural simply means when we are trying to explain something, like during our explanation, obviously our one sentence should be connected to the another. Like there should be a very good flow of communication in our explanation, and the explanation that we are providing for something, that will come under the structure, that will come under the structure thing.
Okay. Anyone else? See, the first aspect is communicative, that you must have already understood when it is simply used as a mode of expression. The second is structural. When you start analyzing the different elements of a language and what do these elements mean individually and together. For example, every sentence has a noun, a pronoun, a verb. So individually they've got their meaning, and when you connect them together, then they form a coherent, complete sentence. So when you start studying these structures or these elements in language, it is called as the structural aspect. So just like in literature, what is the process that we follow? First of all, we read, right? We read a research paper, we read a thesis, we read a book, and there are certain things that we don't agree with. The primary stage is reading. After reading, you understand that there are certain points that are not in sync with your understanding. So you start criticizing. You criticize those points because you've understood the structure in that writing. You've understood the structure of the thought of the writer. You start criticizing those points. After you read, after you criticize, then you create. And when you create, there is something new which comes out. So similarly, communicative, structural, and the last is interaction based. What is that? It sees language as a medium to forge interpersonal relationships among people, which in turn strengthens social relationship. So not every time you use language, you do it to tell that you're hungry or thirsty. Sometimes you also do it to express your love for the other person. Sometimes you also do to console the other person. Sometimes you also do to tell the other person that you want to have a friendly or romantic association with that person. So it is done to forge interpersonal relationship. And this in a way strengthens your social relationship. For example, if you see two people are in a sort of distress, you go to them and you say that, don't worry, I'm here with you. Whatever help you will need, I will extend a helping hand. So that is strengthening of social relationship using language. Is this clear to everyone? Communicative, structural, and interactional. Okay, I want somebody to just quickly tell us in one line each, what are they? Anyone? So who would like to try? Can somebody who's not answered till now respond? Radhika? Riddhi?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, would you like to try? Just one sentence each. Anyone on a voluntary basis? Okay, so
Ma'am,
okay,
you
yes,
can move
Nihan,
on.
go ahead.
Okay, by communicative, we simply means like by communicative, we simply means like language is just used for used for expressing things. Like in communicative, we don't it doesn't mean like we are expressing something that has some hidden meaning to it. Like you gave an example, because I'm thirsty, just give me a glass of water. There is hardly any hidden meaning in it. It's well and clear. By structural, we means like there are some elements which underlies within the which underlies within the sentence, within the sentences of the paragraph, and we obviously have to also understand the hidden meanings in that particular paragraph or in that particular explanation. There will be too much between the lines things. There will be too much analytical things that will come under the structural form. And the third is obviously the interactional, and it basically talks about the it basically talks about interpersonal things like when two or more people are communicating with each other, like when they are doing some kind of interaction, like there is in interaction thing, because we can't say like one person is addressing to a large number of audience. It's particularly a small group of audience that one will convey the idea, and obviously this will come under the interactional thing.
See, the first part, you're right, but it's not necessary that it cannot be to a large group of people. It may or may not be. The idea is simply when you interact to form bonds, and one of the best example can be seen in the election speeches. So they are trying to forge a bond with the people who are all potential voters.
Ma'am, in the same way, I can say like our Prime Minister often does Man Ki Baat. Like we can say कि Man Ki Baat is hardly an interaction, because he often talks about the things which are not very necessary for people. Like he often talks about the things that we hardly need. Like he talks about how we are going to become this and that and something.
All right. See,
I have gone to a bit political, but I apologize.
So that's exactly why I am interrupting, because let's not digress. Interaction is always two-sided. So if I am talking and you're listening, there's hardly any interaction. Interaction means when I talk and you respond. So please keep that as a background when you're writing about this one in future. Okay, there are various languages spoken across the world like English, Hindi, Mexican, Japanese, French, etc. But they all comprise three fundamental components. Till now, we have seen what is language. We have seen that every language has got a cultural baggage. We have also tried to find out in detail the meaning of language. Every language comprises fundamental components. In fact, instead of talking about three main components, I will walk you through all the important ones. So here they are. Is there anyone here who has heard about these terms? Morphology, syntax, phonology. So we're not going to delve in detail because this is not a linguistic class. I just want you to have certain familiarity with these words. That's all. Students from the literature domain especially? So I'm going to talk about this quickly. I have written down the basic understanding of these words in front of the root word. So morphology, the structure and construction of words. So it is a study of words and it talks about their relationship with other words in the sentence. Syntax. Can anyone tell me what a syntax is? This is a common word. You must have heard of it. Syntax. So if I say that there are syntactical errors in your writing, what do I mean? The order and combination of words or relationships among various elements in a sentence. Coming back to what I just said, can anyone tell me if somebody tells you that there are syntactical problems in your writing? What is he simply trying to highlight? Where have you gone wrong?
Maybe in grammatical.
Yes. So the arrangement of your words, the meaning that they are deciphering, it's all out of order. So either the organization of words is not correct or the combination of words that you have used is not correct. So the relationship among the various elements of words in a sentence is disrupted. So this is another component of language, which is syntax. Then you have phonology. It's simple, the sound system of a language. So how a particular word is pronounced, what are the sound associated with a particular word falls under the category of phonology. Next is semantics. So usually we make use of two words, syntactic and semantic. What is semantic? So you must have heard your teacher say that write a research paper which has a syntactic and semantic coherence. What is meant by semantic? As per what I've written here, system that governs the meaning of words and sentences. So syntax, somebody pointed out, is the grammatical arrangement of words, the order and combination of words. What can be semantics?
Study of language.
Study of language. Not really.
Ma'am, the way in which semantic conveys meaning.
Semantic conveys meaning means what?
Ma'am, it conveys meaning to the language.
The way your sentences convey meaning. If you have put together 10 sentences, then they have to be semantically coherent. You have used absolutely correct sentences as per the grammatical rule. So there is no grammatical error in your sentences. But when all the sentences are put together, are they also delivering the intended meaning? If yes, then the semantics are in place. It is semantically correct. If no, if there is any sort of disruption, if the meaning is unclear, or whatever you had intended in the first place is not what is getting conveyed, then there is a problem semantically, right? And the last is pragmatics, the system that combines the above language components into socially acceptable communication. So mostly the steps are the same. When you talk about socially acceptable behavior, or you talk about forging social relationship, that is always going to be the last step. When we're talking about language, forging social relationships, or strengthening your social ties, writing things that are socially acceptable, making your writing socially appropriate, that is going to come in the end, because that in a way shows that you've mastered language. You can create content which is meaningful at multiple levels. So that is called as pragmatics. Morphology, syntax, phonology, semantics, and pragmatics. I just wanted to introduce these words to you, though they're not directly important to language and style, but I thought that you should be familiar with these words. So if this much is clear, let me move forward. Shall we?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, before going on to the next slide, tell me, are all kind of conversations same? Do we use the same words in the same way in every context? Tell me.
No, ma'am.
What do I mean when I say that there are different styles of talking? Do style means accent?
Ma'am, style, I believe, does not exactly mean accent, but it is a different ways of saying a particular phrase. Like, for example, the most commonly used phrase is "How are you?" But
okay,
some people may also say that "What's it like today for you?" or "How are things at your end?"
Definitely.
etc. So I think it's a form of style.
That is a form of style, rightly said. Can you give me a different take on style? So this is right. One sentence can be modified depending on different languages, or the different parts of the country or the world they are used in. So how are you can be definitely used as how you're doing. But if I look at it in the other way possible, okay, I'm going to use the word please, right? And you tell me the word is going to remain the same. I'm going to use the same word, which is please. Now, tell me, is it going to make any difference just by the way I will use the cadence of my voice? Just by the way I'm going to modulate my voice while saying the word please. So the first is, please, what does this show?
Ma'am, you're like requesting someone?
Request. Yes, request. And if I say, please.
Authoritative.
Authoritative. Okay. And I say, please.
Ma'am, it's something to do more with like you're guilty about something. So
yes.
you're.
And if I say, oh, please.
You are trying to avoid someone.
Avoid somebody, or sarcastic, or I'm not agreeing with the other person's viewpoint, or I feel that it's completely ridiculous. So I will say, oh, please, not again. Right? So you see, the word remains the same. The only difference is the way you use it. So that is also a part of style. So let me now take you to the next slide, which is style. What is style? The way in which words are spoken by an individual or group of people. I just gave you an example, and a very relevant example was given by Shivani. Shivani, it was you, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So both of these examples will fall under the category of style. The way in which words are spoken by an individual or by a group of people. A way of delivering social message or personal beliefs. Then it is governed by knowledge, point of view, level of formality, level of complexity, and the tone in which it is conveyed. Tell me, do you think the style of the language will be influenced by knowledge, point of view, level of formality? Do you think this is a relevant point? Or do you think knowledge and point of view and all these things will not make any difference? A style will be style, irrespective of everything. Speak up. Okay, let me rephrase my question. What role do you think formality plays in your style? Style of talking, or style in which you use language, if at all? Speak up. Do you think the level of formality plays any role in shaping your style? If yes, how? Speak up.
Ma'am, I think it has a role to play in it, because if you talk about formality, or if you include education and qualification and level of understanding to it, obviously the style of people, you can find different styles and different kind of people if you go by the, if you go by this category, like level of education, level of understanding, level of qualifications, etc. Because you can, a highly qualified person will always use a more formal style while talking to anyone, even even with a very close one, if you observe it closely. And while an uneducated people, he hardly have any knowledge how to speak things, how to behave in front of a particular group of audience. So obviously his level of understanding, his level of qualification, or you can say the style of formality will be shown through his behavior.
Right, right. Absolutely right, Nihal. So this is a very good example. In fact, if you talk about a person who's well educated, so the way he or she is going to speak to the other person is going to be more polished, more refined, it's going to be more articulate, and the person will be courteous and considerate. Whereas a person who is undereducated, or who is not familiar of the level of formality he should maintain while talking to the other person, the person will be having a very gross approach, and he's going to speak whatever he will feel without any filters. So that is the difference in style of talking as far as the level of formality, knowledge, etc. Are concerned. I also want to know about the level of complexity.
In fact, ma'am, I would like to give you another example. If you talk to a 5-year-old kid or a 6-year-old kid, he will talk to you in the same way that he used to talk with his mother or with her mother. Like he hardly understand, like you are professor in some university, he has no idea about it. He will talk to you in the same way, like he talks with his father or mother or his brother or sister, whatever.
Yeah.
So you can usually judge the level of understanding.
Yes, fine.
Thank you.
That's right. So level of complexity, I want somebody to comment on this. How is style influenced by the level of complexity? And before you start answering, tell me, complexity of what? Which complexity am I referring to? Complexity of thought, or complexity of being able to understand difficult situation, or using complex language? What is this complexity? So what I have written says that your style of talking will be depending on the level of complexity. Complexity of what? Please raise your hand. See, had I been on the other end, these questions would have really made me think. And don't feel shy. Whatever you have in your mind, just go ahead and speak. And remember, there are no wrong answers in literature.
Ma'am,
There are
please
just different
repeat once.
perspectives. Yes.
Please repeat. What did you say? The level of complexity. Please
Yeah.
repeat it.
I just want to know that what is meant by the sentence, style is influenced by the level of complexity.
I think complexity of language, or maybe his understanding.
Both, actually. Both. Level of complexity means how complex a situation is and how you're supposed to handle that situation. And it also means what is your level as far as understanding that complex situation is concerned. So level of complexity of the situation and your own understanding, how thoughtful you are as a person, and how complex, or I should say multidimensional, your understanding is, and the tone in which it is conveyed. So these are the factors which will influence style up to a large extent. Your knowledge of the topic, definitely if you're not knowledgeable, if you've not got enough understanding of a topic, you will not feel too confident before responding, and it is going to reflect in the style in which you will talk. Point of view, very important. What is your subjective take on a situation? If you feel that a particular situation should be favored, you will fight for it. And if you feel that this was not a right thing to do, you will stand against it. So a lot of it also depends on your point of view, level of formality, level of complexity, and the tone in which you are conveying it. Then it can be classified on the basis of mode of communication. Now, there are different ways in which you can understand these styles. The first is mode of communication. How has this message been conveyed to you? Was it in a spoken form or a written form, right? So tell me, if you come to me, for example, and you ask me for a leave, you say that, ma'am, I want to leave tomorrow. And I say, yeah, okay, don't worry, take leave. And versus you send me a written mail that this is to inform you that I want to leave on so and so date. Is there any difference between these two kind of communications? The request is the same, that is for the leave to be granted. The people involved are same, but do you think there's any difference between spoken and written? What does documentation?
Yes, ma'am. One is obviously a formal way of communication, and another can be called as casual.
Which is which?
Like it is informed, like so for example, if somebody mailed you for his leave, to grant a leave to him or her, like he will write, I want to inform you, like I want 2 days leave on so and so date and all. This will come under, the formal way of communication.
Okay.
And another way that that some person they will directly come to you and say, ma'am, I want 2 days leave. This will obviously come under the informal or non-formal way of
informal or semi-formal, right? So you see, written communication, the documented form of writing is generally formal, and the one that is spoken is informal or semi-formal. And if I may just put a context here, then I'm talking about the professional domain. Let us put it like that so that there's no confusion, because somebody might think that this is not always true. So talking in the professional domain, if you have to, make something formal, then it's imperative that you document it. So the style of writing can be classified on the basis of mode of communication, whether it was spoken or written, and also on the basis of register. That is business style, scientific style, advertising style, etc. Can somebody tell me the meaning of register? Register is not what is the first thought that must have come to your mind. It's not the notebook. Register is a word which has got a meaning of its own in linguistics. What is register? So if I say I could not understand anything, if I say I could not understand anything because the doctors were talking in register, what do I mean? Would somebody else like to answer? Nihal is of course very vocal.
Ma'am, on the basis of reports.
On the basis of reports, okay. And if I say I could not understand anything what the teachers were talking because they were talking in registers?
Ma'am, because there was technical jargons.
Technical jargons, okay. I think that would work, technical jargons. So every profession, for example, have got certain words which are part of that register. So there is medical register, there is business register, there is law register, there is academic register. So for example, a doctor says that take this medicine BD. BD means buy daily. So it is a part of his register. And if a teacher says that your report is syntactically wrong, that is a part of a register. So if a business person says that the graph has been going down, so that's a part of his register. So it depends. The style of writing is also influenced by the register, whether it is a business style or it is a scientific style or it is an advertising style, whatever it is. Is this much clear to everyone?
Ma'am, I am getting another meaning of the word register. Like where, when we often talk to our teachers or our professors, like if our professors used to say, okay, don't just talk to me, give me in registered form. So here I am getting the meaning like a level of formality is attached to the word register. Like when somebody is saying, okay, no, give me in registered form. Like he want to say, like I want this thing in a formal way. That's what I'm getting.
So just to add to what you're saying, here I'm talking about the word register from a linguistic perspective, right? When you say give this to me in a registered form, it means nothing but document whatever you have said, write it down. Give this to me in a registered form, just write it down. The other thing the other way of using the word register can be whatever you said did not register itself in my mind. That means I could not understand. It did not register. So there are different ways in which the same word can be used, but here I'm talking about register in this particular context that I just explained. Is it clear?
Yes,
ma'am.
All right. Okay. So I came across a very interesting slide. I have also put down the link of the slide here. If you want, you can access it on your own. So it is a very detailed slide which deals with styles. So if you are interested in finding about language and style in detail, then you can definitely visit this slide. So this particular slide attracted my attention, and I thought that it is a good idea to discuss it with all of you. Language and styles. So different language styles are used to convey different information. Ensure you know when to use each style. Language to attract attention. Used to grab the reader's attention, short and snappy sentences. Now, if I ask that you have to quickly grab attention of your audience, tell me, do you have the liberty of using long-winded sentences or pedantic jargons or sentences running into paragraphs? Do you have that liberty? If I ask you to grab the attention of your audience in like 1 minute, tell me. If I ask you to speak to your audience in a way that their attention gets diverted towards you, so what kind of sentences would you use? Catchy words, catchy phrases, short and snappy sentences, or long-winded sentences full of technical jargons?
Short, snappy sentences.
Short and snappy sentences. And please excuse me for the language which is used here. I told you in the beginning that this is not a slide which I prepared on my own. So short, snappy sentences or sentences that are to the point and immediately they grab the attention of the audience. So the styles in which you will use language will also depend on the purpose. It's not just written or spoken or the kind of registers. What is the purpose of using that particular style? So the first is to attract attention. You will use short sentences. You will use sentences that will immediately draw the attention, which means sentences which are not too long. Next, language to present facts clearly. So before you read it and you just replicate whatever is written here, can you tell me on your own, If you have to present an analytical study, for example, I'm sure all of you know what is the difference between narrative, descriptive, analytical writing. So if you're writing an analytical piece and it's largely based on facts and figures and studies, what kind of the document are you going to prepare? Is it going to be long and detailed, or is it going to be short and concise? And because it's written short and concise here, so don't just copy it, also tell me the reason. So it says short and concise sentences so people understand, no unnecessary description. Why? If you are using language to present facts, why should you keep it short and concise? Why not long, elaborate, and detailed? What is the advantage that you have with facts? Speak up.
Ma'am, facts are something that are accepted by everyone. Like while presenting any fact, yes, like when we are presenting facts, there is hardly any scope of our own opinion. We should not attach our own opinion of it. Just so to present facts, obviously it should not be in a descriptive. It should not be in a descriptive form, because while describing things, you will become biased. Like you will start attaching some people opinions, some of you even your opinions to it. So the purpose of the purpose will the purpose will be defeated through it.
Right. So when you're presenting facts, then there are two advantages. The first is facts are self-explanatory. So if you say that the pandemic has made people lose their jobs and their lives, you don't have to write 20 pages trying to prove your point. You can just pick up numbers from newspapers and from audio clips from news channels, etc., and that will in itself going to substantiate whatever you are saying. And therefore it has to be short, it has to be concise. The other advantage is what Nihal pointed out, that it is accepted by everyone. So naturally something which is self-explanatory and also acceptable by everyone shouldn't be too detailed or lengthy. So it has to be short, it has to be concise, so people understand. You should also drop out all the unnecessary details. Language to impress or persuade. So I hope all of you are able to understand the reason behind explaining this slide to you. The purpose here is different, which is going to impact the style of language. So when you want to impress someone, tell me what kind of a language do you use when you want to impress and not express? So they say language is a mode of expression. No, language is a mode of expression and casting an impression. Tell me, when you have to impress somebody, when you have to persuade somebody, what is the kind of language you will use? How is it going to be different from the language you use in a presentation? So who would like to answer?
Ma'am, okay, actually my audio was mute. So I just want to say that while giving a presentation, we can use we often use a more stylistic accent. We often give it in a more stylistic accent, because we often speak in more or less in the same language. Like if you are talking in English, like a person living in Bihar, if you listen to his style, obviously there is a lot of difference between him and a person who is living in Delhi for the last many years. So obviously when we are giving a presentation, or when we are addressing some formal meeting, we often try to copy some accent from, like we often try to copy some American accent, some European accent, or even some metropolitan accent.
Okay, see, accent is just a part of, it's a paralinguistic skill. I'm talking about language as such. So when you have to impress, you use unusual words and complex sentence structures, so people are impressed with you and or the product you're trying to sell. So if you are going to say that here is a washing powder and you use it, it's not any better than the other washing powder, but yes, probably it's going to be cheaper. So this is a very bland information. But if you just advertise it the other way around, that here is a cheap washing powder which is going to give you milky white clothes, so that is going to impress people that, wow, this is such a good deal. It's cheap and at the same time, it's going to make our clothes milky white. So that is one way. Another way can be, so what has Shakespeare said? The lover, the poet and the lunatic are of imagination all compact. Now imagine if you just want to say that a person who's in love and a person who's a fool, they are both alike. This is a very simple way of saying it. But if you want to impress the other person, you want to make a show of your knowledge, then you can say the lover, the lunatic, and the poet are of imagination all compact. This will show that you have read a word or two, and you also know how to use your knowledge in the context or at the time when you should. So this is how we use language to impress, followed by language to summarize information. This is simple, using bullet points. That is how we summarize something in order to bring everything in a nutshell, whatever has been discussed. Language to collect data from forms. So simple instruction to people. If, for example, you're conducting a research and there's a questionnaire that you want people to fill. Now, if you're going to write sentences that are 3 or 4 lines long, then people are not going to fill that form. They will feel disinterested after 2 or 3 questions. So the best thing to do is that you put simple instructions, and boxes need to be big enough to write in it. Often have an individual box for each character. Detailed instructions, if required, should be provided separately. Right? I have one more slide to discuss, after which I'm going to end this session. And this is levels of style. So far we have used style as an individual word. We have seen what is the different meanings of style. We have also looked at how language and style are interconnected. Now let us see what are the different levels of style. And I would recommend all of you to read Martin Jewes if you want a detailed understanding of style. So according to Martin Jewes, spoken and written style can be classified into 5 levels. And I have not written what each level means. I have just written an example, and I'm going to ask you to guess what this style can mean. So the first style, according to Martin Jewes, is the frozen style. The example is, yes, my lord, or yes, your honor. Can you tell me what kind of a style would be used here? The kind of words that are used in this style, or the kind of organization. And it would be really good if somebody apart from Nihal answers.
Frozen style means to please someone or to request someone.
So when you say yes, your honor, you are not.
Ma'am, we are giving respect by saying yes, my lord.
Okay, giving respect is one. Fine. Anyone else?
Ma'am, I would say by frozen style, we are flattering someone. We often flatter someone. It's hardly a word of respect.
We are flattering someone. Okay, see, frozen style, try to understand. And from the next one, you will understand what exactly I'm expecting you from all of you as an answer. See, when you say frozen style, here, the words are used very carefully. And you do not have the freedom of choosing any word in place of a certain word. So if in your courtroom, etc., you see, yes, my lord, yes, your honor. So these are the words that have been surviving from years. So back in the time of Britishers, and later these words became popular, and we see that some of it is continuing even till now. So the words that you use have to be very carefully done. You cannot just use any other word. Apart from that, these words or the style is used on certain occasions which are formal in nature or for a specific purpose. Apart from that, the form of the style is fixed. As I told you, you cannot take the liberty of substituting one word with the other. And sometimes it also has a historical or symbolic meaning attached to itself. That is frozen style of using language. Yes, my lord, yes, your honor is an example. Now I will move on to an easier style, which is formal style. And an example can be kindly pay attention. What is a formal style? This you should be able to answer.
Ma'am, the formal style basically means, ma'am, when a webinar or some meeting is going on, so the person who is taking charge of the meeting says that, please, my audience, please pay attention on what I'm saying. So this is like of a formal communication style of a thing. Okay. Ma'am, if like I am talking to my friend, I would not say like kindly pay attention, but I can say it informally, like please listen to me, or I'm saying this to. So when there is a formal style, so you can't use slangs or some informal words. So like we have to always say, kindly pay attention or listen to what am I saying.
Okay, all right. So that's right, Spriha. Apart from this, see, try to understand. Formal style is not like frozen style. Why? Because you can use the same message and you can convey it in different ways. Like if I say, everyone is requested to vacate the passage for the chief guest. I can also say, kindly pay attention to the announcement. You're all requested to sit down as the chief guest is about to enter the hall. So you see, the information that I've given is formal, but there is no one style. There is not, this is not like frozen style that I cannot use any other word except for the words that have been given to me. So this is called as formal style. It is used on formal occasions. Sometimes you will find the use of technical jargons done to an excessive level in formal style. Apart from that, the tone also matters. Whenever there is a formal style or a formal use of language, you will find that the tone of the speaker can vary only up to a certain extent. The speaker cannot screech, the speaker cannot shout, the speaker cannot speak in a volume which is not clearly audible. So there has to be a certain tempo which has to be maintained when a person is talking in formal style, and consciously the use of repetition is avoided in formal style. I gave you an example of email right in the beginning, that you shouldn't repeat, kindly pay attention, kindly give me a solution, kindly get back to me, because that will appear very redundant. So this is called as formal style. Next, we have consultative style. Example, doctor-patient discussion. So their short sentences are used, and this is usually done when your conversation is not pre-planned, when you don't know what kind of questions will be asked, what kind of answers you will have to give. So it is more spontaneous in nature, and the question answer takes place on spot, like the discussion between a doctor and a patient. This is called as consultative style. Discussion between a teacher and a student. So here, so many questions were asked to me spontaneously. I did not see these questions coming. This is called as consultative style of using language. Then you have casual style. So here you don't have to be too mindful of propriety or the code of conduct. You can have a relaxed talking, and an example can be, what you got for lunch. So if you see this is not grammatically correct, but no one is going to penalize you because probably you're talking to a friend. So what you got for lunch? This is a casual way of talking, relaxed, and you don't have to worry too much about the grammatical rules or social protocols, etc. So usually when you talk to your friends and family, you use a casual style of talking. And then of course you have intimate style, like, hey dear, how are you? So this is used for romantic exchange of words, and no clear articulation is needed in this kind of style. So it's not necessary that you have to use language to just convey your message. You can talk about other things which are directly or indirectly related to the message that you want the other person to receive.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, can we use intimate style if we have some concern for somebody, or like we have love towards someone?
Yes, definitely. That is going to be classified under intimate style.
Okay, ma'am. As like you were saying, it is on the basis of romantic style. But ma'am, if I want to say this to my friend, like, how are you? Are you okay or not? So like this is also intimate style.
Yes, this is also intimate style. Yes.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
All right. So with this, we come to the end of today's session. I hope it benefits you in one way or the other.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
I want to know one thing, that intimate comes under or informal, na? Means like
intimate is, yes, definitely intimate is informal. Okay, so this should be all from my side. If you have any question or anything that you want to share, please go ahead.
Ma'am, you said in frozen words you can use, we should not use any other word other than that word. But if I have some, if I will talk about my knowledge about the judiciary system, I think there is hardly any rule to call judge by my lord or your honor or something like that. It's just that during Britishers' time, all the Britishers used to be judges, and the lawyers were Indians who used to represent Indians. So Britishers used this way of language just to just to address themselves with some dignity, and we are still following the same style. But today we can also say, Lisa, so you can use my lord in place of my lord. We can use so in a more
Nihal,
respectful way, probably.
I made a note of it immediately after I gave that example. I told you that these are the words that were used in the time of Britishers, and some of it is still surviving. Not all, but we see the reflection of that style in our law and judiciary even till now. So that happens. This is just an example.
Ma'am, can a parent-teacher meeting come under consultancy? Because there is nothing pre-planned.
It is formal, and yes, you can call it as consultative style also. Okay, so with that, I will end the session. Thank you very much.